They should not walk anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
All right,
And
well,
she seems fairly determined, so something like that has to stop her.
we are now recording, so, and speak up, it's picking you up pretty well, but, we'll see how it goes. So, when Soren gave me the breakdown of what chapters he wanted me to cover, he only took us up to the 20th, so I assumed we were stopping before Easter, and that was it. It was just gonna be a crash course on the Westminster Confession of Faith. Like I said, I went back and checked. It was a 39-week class when I taught it to the high school kids. So pretty much the whole thing was discussed verse by verse. But now I found out we're going to skip Easter.
Right.
We're going through to the 10th. So I had already planned the class to do all of this today, which I'd have to talk it about that double speed that Chris just played my video back to do it. So I'm gonna just take my time, give time for questions. Hopefully people still walk in, and we can cover whatever we don't cover today. But last week, we talked about free will, you remember?
Yes.
Okay. It was interesting. I decided to do something extemporaneously. Well, of course, it was determined before the foundation of the world, but I thought I did it extemporaneously. I rearranged the seats, and it's just amazing how easy it was for me to change your will.
Wow.
Yeah, again, God only predetermined.
Chris, because that's where I normally sit.
Yeah, so you took her seat. Nobody took the back seats. There's always a few people who take the second row. We'll see if anybody does do that. But the whole idea of the law of contingencies. Remember we talked about the law of contingencies, that you do not have a free will based on, forget about, even atheists or scientists will believe you don't have a free will. They can't explain how you don't have a free will and how you're still responsible, that you may be mentally deficient and that's what's causing you to make bad decisions, but things like that, they really don't have any answers. I've listened to all kinds of philosophers come and read all kinds of philosophers that come up with all kinds of, crazy ideas. My favorite one, it was in a science journal, had front cover, where you do have a free will. If you choose coffee, somewhere else you chose tea. And that universe now goes, and there's an infinite number of universes, and it's interesting that somebody made a movie about it. Have you seen it? Everything Everywhere All at Once. Basically, you should watch it, definitely after this clip. Oh yeah, very, very good. It's a very good movie. Bizarre, you may have to watch it 3 times to get it. It's like The Matrix. You think you understand it the first time. But basically, instead of a matrix, there's all of these different universes going on at once, where different choices were made and different things happened because of those choices. So again, we don't know how scientists deal with it. Ultimately, we establish laws and we enforce them. But are you free to do anything? It's contingencies. So there's the first cause. What's the first cause? God created the heavens and the earth, right? That's the first cause. Everything else is second and subsequent and contingent causes that are happening because of the contingency prior to that, and the contingency prior to that, and the contingency prior to that, and you live your whole life with everything predetermined. So well, again, I don't even want to say predetermined. God predetermines all things. We are freely acting out our will. And guess what? It happens to coincide exactly with what God had predetermined. So I asked last week, why did you sit in that chair? Could you have sat in another chair, Chris? Mm-hmm. You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, so what that would mean is, because you weren't here, when you walked in that door, why did you sit in that chair? I'll give you a quick answer. You wanted to sit in that chair. Yeah. That's the chair you desired to sit in. You made a decision, milliseconds, so the rearrangement of the chairs. Katie, you moved that chair a little closer to you so you could put your purse there. But if we were full, you might have left it where it was because somebody might have needed that chair. Yeah. All of these decisions are happening and they're contingent on how you were brought up even. What happened with one. So what you're saying, Chris, is when you walked in that door and you wanted to sit in that chair, when you say you could have sat in another chair, well, that means you would have done something you didn't want to do, something that was against your will. Because we know now that it was your will to sit in that chair. Those contingencies all came together. That's the chair you chose. Had you chosen that chair, you would have been doing something against your will. So to have true free will, you have to be able to do what's against your will, which is, it's a contradiction. It just doesn't make sense. So you're always going to do those things that everything. So when we talk about first cause, second cause, contingency, all of that, it's talking about that idea of free will, that when we're making our decisions, they're truly free, which they can't be. They can't be free. If they're free, then we would be able to, you hear a sound and you turn towards the sound. Some people hear a sound and they run away from it automatically. If you hear that sound and you go towards it, even though you wanted to go away from it, is that free will, or is something random? Is chance determining where you sat? Was it a chance occurrence that you sat in that chair? It can't be a chance occurrence, because you would have to roll back time, do it again, everything being exactly the same, and this time you sat there. Why would that happen? It's just not logical that would be what would occur. So she's not here today, so I'm going to have to answer. Someone in this class texted me this. Was I predestined to wear a black shirt today, or was it free will? Was I predestined to become a teacher, or was it a choice? Maybe you could figure out who that is by then. I was going to say, what was my reply? Yes, 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 and yes. Now, the idea that, here's how I asked it last week. Does everybody here agree, believe, know for a fact that God knows the last day we will live? That God knows the day. Now, some of you should have some verses here. So I got Psalm 139. Go ahead and read Psalm 139, whoever has that. Who has it?
I think I got it.
Okay.
All right. Your eyes have seen my formless substance, and in your book were written all the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of them.
Okay, so that's pretty clear. So if we think philosophically, scientific perspective on it, we might say, well, there is no God, so of course God doesn't know the day you're going to die. But not only do we assume God knows that, it's in the Bible. Job 14:5. Who has that one?
Me. Since his days are determined, the number of his months is with you, and you have set his limits so that he cannot pass.
Right. So in case you just thought the number of days, it also means the number of months. It means the number of hours, minutes, seconds. Of course, we made all of those things up. There's no such thing as hours, minutes, seconds. We talked about that. It's in the next video, so watch that. Okay, I know it's impossible for us to get a head wrapped around the idea that we freely make all the choices that we make each moment of our lives, yet all of those choices have been determined by God, not just known by God. In other words, he didn't look into the future and see what you're going to do, and that's what he predetermined. He didn't look into the future and see that you were going to do this amazingly good thing and accept him as your Lord and Savior and say, okay, he's amongst the elect. It just doesn't make sense. That would be the way it works. So he doesn't look into the future. Everything is orchestrated. And, it's hard to say. When I say orchestrated, remember, every time I end a sentence in ED, it means past. ED. It really can't be explaining what God would truly be thinking, because he doesn't think in the past. He is completely and always existing in eternity. So while we are executing our free and unconstrained wills, we are doing what God has predetermined, try not to use past tense, what God has predetermined, even though we have this complete freedom and we're not constrained. What does the word constrained mean?
Limits, boundaries.
No, look it up.
Held down.
Actually, it could be held down. It could also be that. But the word actually means forced. There's a couple of songs we sing, that I'm constrained to sin. I'm constrained to sin. It's like I'm forced to sin, but that's what the word means. Now, you could be constrained by somebody forcing you down. You could be constrained by somebody stopping you. You could be constrained by somebody telling you got to do this. But we're not constrained, forced in either direction. Our wills are free. We have free agency is probably the better way to put it. But again, people have a problem with free will. if you replace the word wanted to do this with will, that's what free agency is. So we're not going to be forced to do what we do at that time because God had predetermined it. We're going to be forced to do, in a sense, I put it in quotes, to do what we are doing at that time because that was what we wanted to do. I use the example that I used to have with the high school kids. I'd say, oh wow, I had liver and onions for dinner last night. And some of them would actually start gagging, and I said, so you'll never eat liver in your life? No, never. I said, well, is it your free will to eat liver? That was when we were teaching on this chapter, which I spent 3 days on. So again, it's and when I did that in the adult class in the OPC, very hyper-Calvinistic denomination, attracts those nut jobs, they wrote letters to the pastor and the elders that were there saying, Sal taught that class wrong. I taught what the Westminster Confession of Faith teaches. Okay, so let me read it. For us to actually have true freedom would be for us to be able to choose to do something that is contrary to our will rather than the thing that our will would have us do. Crazy, right?
But isn't having our own will, therefore our own freedom?
Yes, I have absolutely, I believe like all the Baptists in here, you are absolutely free to do everything, and this is especially true in the ARP. You didn't hear this, it's in the last week's class, I think. When I asked Soren when he was becoming a pastor, I got to ask him 3 questions. And somebody had previously asked him what's different about the ARP than any other denomination. He went to some, obscure doctrine and stuff like that, which is true. There's difference we'll cover it in the civil state, what we believe with the other ones, the power of the state over the church, etc. I don't remember what his answer was, but I was the next one to ask. And I said, I want you to answer this quickly. Can anyone be saved? Yes, he said immediately. Ask anybody in the OPC or the PCA that question. They'll either ponder it and think, or they'll say no, only the elect can be saved. He immediately said it. When I met Jack and Roman and Callista, the college kids, GAD students at our prayer group, they had heard about me, I don't know how, at one of the town meetings. So he probably asked the question and said, oh, ask Sal. So that's why they were looking for me. So, okay, what's the difference between PCA and they didn't say PCA, I'm sorry, I messed up the story. What's the difference between ARP and these other Reformed denominations? Why would you be here? So I said, okay, 3 of them lined up. Callista, can anybody be saved? Yes. Roman, can anybody be saved? Yes. Jack, can anyone be saved? You were brought up in the PCA, right? How'd you know that? Okay, because that's why they gave me trouble about free will. You have a free will as much as anyone else has a free will, as much as scientists believe you have a free will. And I could give you some philosophy books by scientists. This guy that won the Templeton Award, I love the way he puts it. He says everything is determined, not because God determined it. Is there a higher power? He would get into that, and that's why he won the Templeton Award. He accepts that there's something supernatural beyond us. That's all you need to do. You don't have to believe in the God. But he would say, no, we as scientists also know there's no free will. And he goes on a lot of what I just said about you deciding to go here or go there, and not using your will is from his book. But go ahead.
And maybe the short answer or the short version of his book is that there is no free will because sort of like the law of cause and effect, and all the previous causes predetermine the subsequent effects, and you're a product of, and so whatever causes brought me to this room, the effect was coming here, whatever ways I previously was formed to think caused me to choose this chair, in essence.
And maybe you banged your head this morning, or maybe you had too much
Actually,
coffee.
I banged my head on a nail this weekend.
How did I know that? So again, but I used the word to describe what you just said. Does anybody remember what it was? Starts with a C. I said first cause. So you were talking about cause and effect. First cause is God. Everything else was an effect of that cause, up to the point you being born. And it's contingency. That's what the word contingency means. Contingencies are those things that were caused by an effect that happened before there was a cause that was And that's a contingency. Everything's contingent. So God could work, it says, as we'll cover it. Again, you'd have to read the chapters completely, because we're certainly not going to cover every section of the chapters. But you'll see it actually explains that yes, our existence is going to be cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. So rationally and logically speaking, we don't have free will because we have free will. I mean, it sounds like a contradiction. Well, here, we all agreed that, God, and we read it from the Bible, that God knows the day we're going to die. So the example I gave last week is when you leave this building, are you truly free to go left or right? Remember what you said? Are you truly free to go left and right when you walk out of this building today? Not a trick question. Yes, right? I may want to take the long walk because the azaleas are blooming and go around this way to go to the church. I might want to go this way. So I'm free to make that choice. But could that free choice possibly be something different from what God had predetermined? You think it's possible it could be different? Okay, why can't it be different? Do you remember the example I used?
Was there something with the brick?
The brick. Good, I'm so glad you all remembered the brick. I gotta say, I came up with that one myself. I didn't read it anywhere, but it's probably somewhere there.
Give me the quick on the brick.
Give you a quick on the brick. Walk out the door. You decide to go left when God had predetermined you to go right. And God is saying, yikes! He was supposed to go right. He went left. Oh no, there's a brick. If he goes left, there's a brick. It's gonna fall and it's gonna hit him on the head and kill him. You just thwarted God's determination of what day, which we all agreed, he knows you're going to die. So it's not possible that you could have walked in a direction that could have changed the day that you're going to die. The most clear from those verses and logical. We know that God created us and he knows those numbers of days. So when I taught this in the past, especially with the high school kids, there's always some wise guy, usually a girl, that says, well, God could make the brick miss you if you make that. So it's your free will, but he can control the brick and it doesn't hit you on the head. And I would say, so, and when exactly did God do that? Did he do it as you were walking close and just kind of give it a little taps and one of his angels? Did he do it before the foundation of the world? Did he predetermine that he was going to do that if you turned left? This concept called the middle knowledge of God, that God can look into the future and see what choices you have available to make to you. So he works within those things. I send you a link to it's an ARP pastor that did this at a conference I went to. It's really mind-blowing. So if you're interested, I'll send it. But obviously, no, God, well, here, let's do it. When I offered that, I said, okay, was it at the moment in time or before the foundation of the world? Keep in mind, God does not exist in moments. He is eternally existing. He knows the end from the beginning. He cannot learn that you made a right instead of a left at that moment because he would be learning something new. And God can't learn anything new. God can't learn anything new. You got to get your head wrapped around that concept, bless you. And if God can't learn anything new, there can't be anything that's going to surprise him that you would do. And if you can't do anything that's going to surprise him, it can't be that he just looked into the future and saw what you're going to do. That's ridiculous. Again, that's what people use to try to cobble together a free will gospel that is not in the Bible. Okay. Yes, it is impossible for us to get our heads wrapped around the reality that, yes, we have a free will to choose and do what we want to do when we want to do it. And we are doing those things and making those choices because that is what we want to do at that moment. While at the same time, those things that we are freely choosing to do is exactly and unchangeably what God had predetermined. Did you write that all down in your notes? Okay. I posted a copy of the notes too. Okay. Does anybody have the book?
Yeah, I have the shorter.
No, actually I wanted to use the ones that they use. It really doesn't matter. Again, it might be different. That's what I want to see. As we go, we're going to see that the ones that's in this book, which is Sinclair Ferguson's introduction and all of that, are different than the ARP, Westminster Confession of Faith. So I might catch a difference. So go ahead and read 5. Oh, wait. No, we're gonna start with, chapter 3, section 1. Read all of chapter 3, section 1.
God from all eternity did by the most wise and holy counsel of his own will freely and unchangeably ordain whatsoever comes to pass. Yet so, as thereby neither is God the author of sin, nor is violence offered to the will of the creatures, nor is the liberty or contingency of second causes taken away, but rather established.
Get that?
Sort of.
Read that last sentence, but. And does it say-
Nor is the liberty, that part?
Yeah, nor.
So it says, God is the author of sin, neither is God the author of sin, nor is violence offered to
Okay,
the will
violence.
of the creatures.
What does he mean by that? Nor violence.
Harm.
No, that's what it means. Again, Old English word, I don't know why they don't
Chaos.
update. It means constraint. Nor is force being put on the liberty. The liberty is free, it's not being forced or constrained would be the exact translation of violence in any way. So violence means to impose your will on somebody else's will. Now, nor is the
Liberty
freedom,
or contingency.
second
Of
causes.
second causes taken away, but rather established.
So the Westminster Confession of Faith kind of turns this whole contradiction on its head. It says not only do you have a free will, but the reason you have a free will is because God has predetermined things. So it establishes this truth that you have this liberty, that nothing is being forced upon you to make one choice or another. So again, it's really difficult. But here, who's got Romans 8:28? Oh, that's the one you're going to read from the book there, yes. This is the New King James Version.
Here we are. And we know that all things work together for the good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose.
You notice he paused a little bit there? The New King James Version and some of the other versions will try to follow the Greek exactly word for word. You can't do that in this verse. I have the Greek here, it'll be posted, you can look it over, check the words in your concordance if you want. This is the way it's stated in the New American Standard Version, which implies a comma that's not there, but there's commas that are implied in all kinds of things. I think this truly uses the words that are there in the correct context. It says, and we know that God causes, not just that things work together, that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. And actually the word his is not in there, according to purpose. There's this purpose that God has. And he's going to assure that all things are constantly working together for that cause, for that purpose that he has, which we'll go over maybe next week, but we'll see. Now here's the question. Has anybody memorized that verse? Because it's one that, okay, so it's a good one to memorize. You know, it's very comforting that you would say, oh wow, I'm having a rough week. I tell you, when I pray with the homeless people, I'll always bring up this verse and say, you know, we don't know why God has this happening to you right now, especially the ones that are like shocked. I've been on the street for 2 months and, you know, I was living in a house 3 months ago. It's just mind-boggling to them. And we got a couple of people, 3 people, I think, off the street at this last Thursday meeting. I hope you guys can maybe take days off sometime and join that. But I'll read this verse and say, you know, when you get to heaven, you know, ask them if they're a Christian first. When you get to heaven, you know, God's going to meet us. You know, let me explain. I'm going to explain the whole thing to you, how I was working all things together, even in that horrible experience you had. We know we have the story of Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, where all these horrible things happen, and at the end he gets to say, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. So that's how it resolves the contradiction. But do you believe that God can keep that promise? Can God keep that promise that he's going to work all things together for good for you? It's in the Bible. We're supposed to believe everything the Bible says. How could God do that if he doesn't have control over everything at every moment and is even orchestrating everything in real time? Now again, real time is what we exist in. God doesn't exist in real time. God exists in eternity. So we can't. So this is the way I put it. Well, let's read this. Let's read the next section first. So let's go to chapter 3, section number 1.
You just did that.
We just did that.
Oh, we did. Oh, yeah. Sorry. So, oh, yeah. Okay. All right. That's right. I kind of shifted this around. So when I say to you, yes, God has already predetermined who will be saved and who will not be saved, I realize it is impossible for you or anyone to think that is just unfair. That is unfair, that this group of people that are over here can't be saved, and this group of people that are over here can't be saved. And you see that reaction on your face? That's exactly what I wanted. Others are not quite reacting the same way, but it's unfair.
It's all in here.
Again, it's all in here, but in reality, it can't be in here because your head would explode. It can't. You'd have to be God to understand how that's not fair. But wouldn't it be great if there was a verse in the Bible that explains this and confirms it, so we can say, well, I don't see that in my Bible. And there is. And I'll never forget, I went to Bible study at my cousin's church, and there was an elder there, or they called them deacons, really, they're elders, and his wife and a few people. And, and I said, somebody said something in a prayer, and me, I said, well, in Romans, blah, 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 blah. And she said, oh, that book of Romans, I wish they would take it out of the Bible. And John Wesley, if I taught this in the Methodist church, I don't know which block has the Methodist church, they would kick me out.
Did you hear that?
Sorry, I just heard
Yes.
bagpipe.
No, we got
Oh,
distracted
really?
by
Yeah,
that.
he plays under the Oglethorpe statue every Sunday morning.
Oh, I've never
Yeah,
heard that before.
it's just one song and he's off.
Oh,
I don't know if every morning, I've seen him a few times. Okay, so let me read the verse that we find in Romans 9:6-24. It's long, but listen and write down your questions or think about your questions. Because while Paul was preaching this probably for the first time before he wrote it down to become a letter to the Romans, he was touching on the same questions and the same confusion that we have now. It's nothing new, and this is how it is. And basically he's talking about how it's not just the people who of Israel, because he's telling the Romans now, hey, this is open to you. So yeah, our people were given the law and all of that stuff, but now it's not just the people who are of the promise originally, it's now extending. So it's kind of long. And who's keeping track of the time? Because I didn't bring my watch.
Oh, it's 9:36 right now.
Okay, so let me know when it's 9:45, and then we'll move on to, we'll do the rest next week. But it is not as though the word of God has failed. For not all who are descended from Israel belong to Israel, and not all are children of Abraham because they are his offspring. But through Isaac, so we know Isaac is one of the old-time people in the Old Testament. He's saying, quoting God, through Isaac shall your offspring be named. He's saying, okay, I'm telling you before your wife was even pregnant that through your son, this is how the lineage is going to continue. This means that it is not the children of the flesh who are the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted as offspring. So he's saying that through Isaac, that one of his children is going to be a part of that promise. For this is what the promise said. Now he's quoting God. About this time next year, I will return. Oh no, this is the prophet saying this to him, prophesying what God's telling him. About this time next year, I will return, and Sarah shall have a son. And not only so, but also when Rebekah had conceived children by one man, our forefather Isaac, though they were not yet born and had done nothing either good or bad, in order that God's purpose of election might continue, not because of works, but because of him who calls, she was told, the older will serve the younger. As it is written, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. And he made that distinction before they were born. And you know what everybody that Paul was talking to did? Made that face. Come on. That's effed up. I mean, you're telling me that even though I'm doing this and I'm worshiping and I'm tithing and all of this stuff, and you want me to come into this, I don't have to be circumcised, that's nice, but I'm going to follow certain things, and it doesn't mean anything, that it's already predetermined. And this is his response when he sees that reaction. What shall we say then? Is there injustice on God's part? So we feel there's injustice. It's not fair. These people can't be saved. These people can be saved. Is there injustice on God's part? By no means. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. Again, quoting from the Old Testament. So then it depends not on human will or exertion, but on God who has mercy. For the scripture says to Pharaoh, for this very purpose I have raised you up, that I might show my power in you, and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. So when he has mercy on whomever he wills, and he hardens whomever he wills. You will say then, again, he's still getting the same reaction. That didn't cut it. You will say then, why does he still find fault? If you're saying everything's predetermined, and I go and I bang my neighbor over the head, which is against the law in the Old Testament, how can he find fault with me if he's predetermined everything? Why does he still find fault? For who can resist his will? But who are you, says Paul, O man, to answer back to God? Will what is molded say to its molder, why have you made me like this? Has the potter no right over the clay to make out of the same lump one vessel for honorable use and another for dishonorable use? Literally, the words that are used here, one to cook a lovely meal in the kitchen, another one to, he says S-H-I-T-N, poopin. Paul didn't hold back the words. He uses it a couple times in the Bible. That's what it is. The potter could make that. What do you got on the schedule today? Okay, got to make a toilet. The same play. He's making, the potter has and God's the potter, obviously. In order, prepared for destruction, after you would use it, you throw it away. In order to make known the riches of his glory for the vessels of mercy, which he has prepared beforehand for glory. In other words, is it not logical that God would have these people that he's not going to show his mercy to, so that the abounding riches of his mercy could be shown in the people he does? How many people should go to heaven that have ever lived?
Nobody.
Just one. Gotcha. Jesus, of course. Jesus was a man, lived a perfect life.
Yeah.
But you're right. Nobody. There's nobody who ever lived that, not even Adam. It was just God's, love. Oh, is that the right time? No.
You've got 4 more minutes.
Okay. It's the fact that God gave Adam the opportunity to not, to choose whether he was going to eat the apple or not eat the apple. That was God's mercy. He didn't have to do that. He created, we'll go into it next week now. But, so he says, in order to make his riches known for the glory, for vessels of mercy, which he has prepared before for glory, even us whom he called, not just the Jews only, but also the Gentiles. So not just us Jewish people, but also the Gentiles that are now being welcomed in. Now, when you read that, go home and read it again. Read it again. You should memorize some of what he says there in that Romans 9 chapter. He's not giving us, he says, what if? What if? What if? In other words, if the reality was that this is what God was doing, that in your meager mind, what you could understand when he's trying to explain this, just like I'm trying to explain it to you, he's saying, hey, I'm going to go on to explain to you how you have a free will, that you make all your choices. It's going to be throughout the Bible that we're going to leave with you at some point. But what if God decided, I'm just going to make these people who can't be saved and these people who can be saved, and who are you to answer back to me? He's not saying that's what it is. He's just saying, let your mind understand that God could do whatever he wants. He's the potter. He can make you for destruction. He can make you for mercy. But what we're going to go into next week now is that the purpose that God has is focused on one thing. I'll tell you, and then see if you remember next week. His own glory. what is God going to do when he creates these people? Why did he even bother creating us? I'm sure he was having a good time in heaven with the Holy Spirit and Jesus, not having these people to deal with. I mean, as you read about in the Old Testament, you want to pull your hair out. And he says, you know, I'm going to make these people because this will bring glory to me. They're going to worship me. They're going to love me. And I'm going to deserve that worship because I love them back. So, we got it? Another minute. I'm just going to read this one quote, which I wanted to make sure we got to. This is Charles Spurgeon. And I'm going to post the link to this sermon. You can listen to the whole thing. It's also, he's addressed this issue in a book or a pamphlet that I'll give you a link to if you want to read it. The sermon is amazing. It's 41 minutes long and definitely worth it. He was being accused of being a Calvinist, and he says, I am a Calvinist. You know, I do believe in election. And his Baptist church was like, they reacted like you guys reacted. But this is from that sermon. Now I believe in predestination, yea, even its very jots and tittles. I believe that the path of a single grain of dust in the March wind is ordained and settled by a decree which cannot be violated. That every word and thought of man, every flittering of a sparrow's wing, every flight of a fly, the crawling of a beetle, the gliding of a fish in the depth of the sea, that everything, in fact, is foreknown and foreordained. But I do equally believe in the free agency of man, that man with acts a will as he wills, does what he wants to do, especially in moral operations, choosing the evil with a will that is unbiased by anything that comes from God, biased only by his own depravity of heart and the perverseness of his habits, choosing the right too, with perfect freedom, though sacredly guided and led by the Holy Spirit, yet in such a way that his disposition is trained to choose and prefer the right and the true, not violently driven in the teeth of his own reluctance, not being forced, free in his agency, for the Son of God has made him free. I believe that man is as free as if everything were left to chance. That's a pretty bold statement. We don't want everything to be left to chance. We love the fact that God has control, but he's making a hyperbolic argument in his sermon, and that he is accountable as if there were no destiny whatever. The contradiction. Where the two truths meet, I do not know, nor do I want to know. They do not puzzle me, since I have given up my mind to believing them both. Isn't that great? It's in a book called Spurgeon versus Hyper-Calvinism that I was condemned for quoting from at the OPC, but it's very good Bible stuff. All right, so any questions?
So many.
Just text them to me. Lindsay's been texting me questions, and I'm answering them.
Do you want to hold on?
Yes, which these are the ones we didn't read?
Yeah, I didn't read them.
I have copies of them, so I can print it out
So you
again.
don't have to do it
Save
again.
the printer ink. All right, let me stop this. All right, this one was only 38 minutes. The last one was 52, would you believe?